In the year 58 before Christ, when the cold winds from the north carried rumors of restless tribes, Rome's frontiers felt fragile. Out there on the edge of the known world, one Roman leader made a choice that would echo for centuries. Julius Caesar gathered men who were not simply soldiers. He forged a family in arms, a legion that would walk into storms and come out sharpened. They called themselves the 10th. Later, people would remember them as Fretensis, the Legion of the Strait, a name tied to narrow waters and tight passages where courage mattered more than numbers. Imagine the early mornings in Gaul. Mist clung to the fields, boots pressed dew into the grass. The men of the 10th learned to move as one, shields aligned like shutters against the weather. They were not giants or mythical heroes. They were farmers' sons, craftsmen's apprentices, men who loved letters from home and a warm fire after a march. What set them apart was something quieter than fearlessness. It was the habit of trust. They trusted the man beside them to hold the line. They trusted their centurions to steady the rhythm. And they trusted Caesar to see the whole field when all they could see was the rim of a shield. People often ask what made the 10th so respected. Part of the answer lies in how they grew up together. Many of the original recruits stayed for years, long enough to share jokes, losses, and the small rituals that make a group feel like family. They created their own songs for the march. They marked time by winters, spent building roads and bridges, and summers spent reading the land like a map written in rivers and ridges. Their standards, those poles crowned with Roman eagles and wreaths, were more than symbols. They were promises. There were days when the world pressed in hard. At places like Bibracte, when enemy lines seemed endless, the 10th did not try to be louder or more furious. They narrowed their formation, tightened the angle of the shield wall, and took careful steps forward. Later, storytellers would call one of their favorite moves the lightning charge. It was a measured wedge, designed to split a line just enough to let light in. The trick was timing, breath, and a sudden quiet that fell right before the first contact. Veterans remembered that quiet for the rest of their lives. Caesar sometimes stood where the danger felt closest, not to turn the moment into a spectacle, but to share the risk. The men watched the crimson of his cloak and found steadiness in it. In a world where orders could be harsh and pay uncertain, that simple act of standing with them signaled something rare. It said, "We carry this together." Over time, that shared burden hardened into loyalty that did not need to be shouted. The name Fretensis has an interesting story. It likely came from service near narrow seas, the straits where winds funnel and waves behave like living things. Crossing such waters taught the legion a lesson that followed them on land. In tight places, every small choice matters. A single step too fast can break a line. A single heartbeat too slow can close a door. The 10th learned to read those moments like sailors read currents. They became experts at moving through pressure without losing shape. Their centurions wore crests that ran side to side so the men could find them in the churn of battle. That small design choice saved lives. A soldier who could spot his leader in a blur of dust and shouting had a thread to hold. It meant orders traveled like sparks along a wire. It meant the unit could bend and not break. There is a scene many love to picture when they think of the 10th. A river in Italy, quiet at dawn. The Rubicon was not wide, but it was a boundary filled with consequences. Caesar made his choice, and the 10th stepped first into the water. The current was cold. The future was uncertain. They crossed anyway, not because they craved conflict, but because their loyalty felt clear. Later, at Pharsalus, when opposing legions began to falter, the 10th did what they always did. They kept their cadence, used their shields with care, and let patience win the ground. What makes an army endure is rarely the shine of its armor. It is the small daily practices. The 10th trained to build as much as to fight. They cut roads through forests, measured stone for bridges, and set camps with the precision of architects. At night, they shared food, fixed sandals, and told stories that turned fear into something manageable. They watched the stars and set their inner clocks by fires that burned to embers, while sentries hummed to stay awake. These details made them human. These details made them strong. A few curiosities bring them closer. The 10th cherished a bull as a sign of steady strength and stubborn will. Some veterans carved tiny bulls into the wood of their scabbards for good luck. New recruits learned the names of their unit's banners like family names. When they received their pay, some tucked a coin inside the fold of a belt as a private ritual, a reminder that fortunes turn and one must stay ready. And though many legions rotated personnel often, the 10th held on to its core longer than most, which gave them a home inside the marching columns. It would be easy to tell this story as a chain of victories, but the truth is richer. The 10th knew loss. They buried friends beneath simple mounds and marked the spot with stones arranged in quiet patterns only they understood. They wrote letters that began with ordinary observations about weather and food, but ended with the soft hope of a safe return. In those moments, the legion was not a legend. It was a circle of people doing their best to keep one another alive. So when we ask why Caesar trusted them, the answer feels simple. He trusted their habits. He trusted their calm in tight places, their care with formation, their willingness to build the road before walking it. He trusted that when the choice came, they would choose each other. If you love history as much as we do, we would be honored to walk further with you. Like this video, share it with a friend who enjoys a good story, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires. There are many more roads to travel together, and the past still has a quiet way of speaking to those who listen. Picture this. It's 58 years before Christ, and Gaul stretches endlessly beyond Rome's northern borders like an untamed wilderness. The Celtic tribes are restless, their warriors fierce and unpredictable. Into this dangerous frontier steps a man who would change history forever. Gaius Julius Caesar, newly appointed governor with ambitions as vast as the lands he's meant to protect. But Caesar knew something that many generals before him had learned too late. You can't conquer the unknown with ordinary soldiers. You need something special, something unbreakable. And so, in the dust and sweat of a Roman training camp, the 10th Legion was born. Now here's where the story gets interesting. Most Roman legions were formed, fought their campaigns, and then disbanded when their service ended. But Caesar had different plans for his 10th. These weren't just temporary soldiers. They were going to become his personal guard, his most trusted weapon, his brothers in arms for decades to come. The name Fretensis itself tells us a fascinating story. It means of the strait, and it comes from those treacherous waters between Sicily and mainland Italy, the Strait of Messina. You see, before these men became Caesar's legendary infantry, they had sailed those dangerous waters, learning to work together when death lurked beneath every wave. They understood that survival meant absolute trust in the man beside you. But here's what makes this legion truly extraordinary. While other Roman commanders treated their soldiers as replaceable pieces on a board, Caesar saw his 10th legion as something entirely different. He called them his comitatus, his personal companions. Can you imagine? A Roman general, one of the most powerful men in the world, calling common soldiers his companions. This wasn't just clever politics, though it certainly was that. Caesar recognized that loyalty born from respect and shared hardship was worth more than any amount of gold. While other legions served for their standard 25 years and then retired to their farms, the men of the 10th stayed with Caesar for campaign after campaign, battle after battle. Think about what this meant for these soldiers. Most legionaries served their time, earned their discharge bonus, and faded into history. But the men of the 10th, they were part of something legendary from the very beginning. They knew that when Caesar looked across a battlefield, searching for the unit that would break the enemy line, his eyes would find them first. The recruitment process itself was unlike anything Rome had seen before. Caesar didn't just want strong backs and steady hands. He wanted men who could think, adapt, and fight as one unstoppable force. He personally interviewed potential centurions, looking for that spark of intelligence and fierce determination that would make them leaders of legends. And here's a detail that most people don't know. The 10th Legion developed their own unique battle traditions right from the start. While other legions relied on standard Roman tactics, The 10th began experimenting with new formations, new strategies, new ways of moving across the battlefield like a single deadly organism. Caesar watched his new legion train in those early days, and he must have known he was witnessing something special. These weren't just soldiers learning to march and fight. They were becoming the instrument through which he would reshape the ancient world. Every drill, every practice battle, every shared meal around the campfire was forging bonds that would prove stronger than steel when the real fighting began. The Celtic tribes of Gaul had no idea what was coming their way. They had faced Roman legions before, fought them, sometimes even defeated them. But they had never encountered anything like Caesar's 10th, a unit that combined traditional Roman discipline with an almost supernatural ability to adapt, overcome, and emerge victorious against impossible odds. This was just the beginning of their story, but already you can see what made them different. They weren't just another legion in Rome's vast military machine. They were Caesar's chosen, his most trusted weapon, forged in the crucible of Gallic warfare and tempered by a loyalty that would last for generations. The stage was set, the players were in position, and somewhere in the forests of Gaul, destiny was waiting to unfold. Now imagine yourself standing on a hill overlooking the battlefield of Bibracte. The year is 58 before Christ, and below you stretches a scene that would test everything the 10th Legion had trained for. The Helvetii tribe, over 300,000 men, women, and children seeking new lands, had swept down from the Alps like a human avalanche. Caesar's forces were outnumbered, but that wasn't the worst part. The 10th Legion found themselves in the most dangerous position of all, holding the center of the Roman line while enemy warriors pressed in from three sides. Most commanders would have ordered a retreat. Caesar did something that shocked even his own officers. He drew his sword and marched straight into the thick of battle alongside his beloved 10th. Picture that moment. There's Caesar, his famous red cloak whipping in the wind, fighting shoulder to shoulder with common soldiers. This wasn't just military strategy. It was a bond of brotherhood forged in the heat of combat. When the men of the 10th saw their general risking everything beside them, something incredible happened. Their battle cry echoed across the field. Legio X, Invicta, 10th Legion, unconquered. But what really set the 10th apart wasn't just their courage, it was their innovation. While other legions stuck to traditional Roman tactics, the 10th began developing something entirely new. They called it the fulminata, the lightning charge. Imagine a wedge of armored soldiers moving like a single unstoppable force, their shields locked together, their spears pointing forward like the tip of a massive arrowhead. Here's something most people don't realize. This formation wasn't just about brute force. The soldiers had to move with perfect timing, each man knowing exactly when to step, when to strike, when to shift the formation's weight. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and the entire wedge would collapse. But when it worked, and with the 10th, it almost always worked, enemy lines would simply melt away before them. The Celtic warriors were brave, incredibly brave. They fought with a ferocity that had terrified Roman armies for centuries. But they had never faced anything like the 10th's lightning charge. Picture their confusion as this wall of bronze and iron came thundering toward them, moving with mechanical precision, yet driven by unmistakably human determination. After Bibracte, word spread throughout Gaul like wildfire. The Romans had a new kind of legion, one that fought differently, thought differently, and seemed impossible to defeat. Tribal leaders who had never feared Rome before began to whisper about Caesar's wolves, soldiers who could appear anywhere, strike like lightning, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the 10th wasn't their tactical brilliance or even their unwavering loyalty to Caesar. It was how they transformed warfare itself. Before the 10th, battles were often chaotic affairs where individual courage determined the outcome. But Caesar's favorite legion showed that disciplined teamwork, combined with tactical innovation, could overcome any odds. The men themselves began to change too. Veterans who had survived multiple campaigns developed an almost supernatural ability to read the flow of battle. They could sense when an enemy line was about to break, when a retreat was about to become a rout. When the perfect moment had arrived, to unleash their devastating charge. And here's something that gives you chills when you think about it. These soldiers knew they were making history. They understood that every battle they won, every impossible victory they achieved, was adding another chapter to a legend that would outlive them all. That knowledge didn't make them reckless. It made them unstoppable. Caesar watched his 10th Legion evolve from skilled soldiers into something approaching military perfection, and he knew he possessed something unique in the ancient world. Other generals commanded armies, but Caesar led a brotherhood of warriors who would follow him anywhere, face any enemy, and emerge victorious against odds that should have crushed them. The forests of Gaul had become their proving ground, and they had proven themselves beyond any doubt. But their greatest challenges still lay ahead, in battles that would shake the foundations of the Roman Republic itself. Fast forward to 49 before Christ, and Caesar finds himself facing the most difficult decision of his life. The Roman Senate, terrified of his growing power and popularity, has ordered him to disband his armies and return to Rome as a private citizen. They know that without his legions, Caesar would be defenseless against his political enemies. It's a death sentence disguised as a legal order. Standing on the banks of the Rubicon River, the sacred boundary that no Roman general could cross with armed forces, Caesar faces a moment that will echo through eternity. Behind him stretches Gaul, now firmly under Roman control thanks to 8 years of brilliant campaign. Ahead lies Italy, Rome, and either triumph or destruction. But here's the remarkable thing. Caesar doesn't make this choice alone. As he stands there, weighing the fate of the Republic, his most trusted soldiers gather around him. The men of the 10th Legion have followed him through countless battles, shared his victories and his dangers. Now they face the ultimate test of loyalty. Think about what this moment meant for these soldiers. They weren't politicians or aristocrats playing games of power. They were fighting men who had sworn oaths to both Caesar and to Rome itself. Crossing that river would make them all traitors in the eyes of the law. Their families, their futures, their very lives hung in the balance. Yet when Caesar finally gave the order, it was the 10th Legion who stepped into those cold waters first, not because they were forced to, but because they had made their choice. Their general had led them to glory time and again, had fought beside them, had shared their hardships and their triumphs. When the moment came to choose between Rome and Caesar, they chose the man who had never failed them. The crossing itself became the stuff of legend, but the real drama came afterward. As Caesar's small army marched down the Italian peninsula, city after city opened its gates without a fight. The reputation of the 10th Legion preceded them like a thundercloud. People had heard the stories from Gaul. They knew what these soldiers could do. Pompey the Great, Rome's other legendary general, gathered his forces for what everyone knew would be the decisive battle. At Pharsalus, in the hills of northern Greece, 2 titans of the ancient world would finally meet. Pompey commanded nearly twice as many soldiers, including veterans from his own legendary campaigns. By every logical measure, Caesar should have been crushed, but logic hadn't counted on the 10th Legion. Here's something fascinating about that battle. You could actually identify the centurions of the 10th from a distance because of their unique helmet crests. While most Roman officers wore their horsehair plumes running front to back, the centurions of the 10th wore theirs sideways, transverse crests that caught the light differently and helped their men spot them even in the chaos of combat. This wasn't just military fashion. In the heat of battle, when dust clouds everything and the noise is deafening, soldiers need to see their leaders. Those sideways plumes became beacons of hope, signals that their centurions were still fighting, still leading, still holding the line. It was psychological warfare at its most subtle and effective. When the 2 armies finally clashed at Pharsalus, something extraordinary happened. Pompey's forces, despite their numerical advantage, began to waver almost immediately. They were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Soldiers who moved with perfect coordination, who anticipated each other's actions, who fought not just for victory, but for the man who had made them legendary. The 10th Legion didn't just break Pompey's line. They shattered the old Roman Republic forever. With that victory, Caesar became the undisputed master of the Roman world, and his faithful 10th had made it all possible. But here's the most incredible part of this story. Even after they had helped Caesar conquer Rome itself, the soldiers of the 10th never lost sight of what had brought them this far. They remained that close-knit brotherhood of warriors, still ready to face any challenge, still loyal to the general who had transformed them from ordinary soldiers into legends. The die had been cast, as Caesar famously said, but it was the 10th Legion who ensured it landed exactly where their general needed it to fall. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. When Caesar fell to assassins' daggers on the Ides of March, many thought the 10th Legion would fade into history with him. After all, they had been Caesar's personal force, his chosen companion. What place would they have in a world without their beloved general? The answer came in the form of a young man named Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, who would later become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. When Octavian inherited Caesar's legacy, he inherited something far more valuable than gold or land. He inherited the loyalty of the 10th Legion. Think about what this meant for these battle-hardened veterans. They had already followed one leader to the heights of power, had already changed the course of history. Now they were being asked to do it again, this time for a man barely out of his teens who had never fought a single battle. It would have been easy to walk away, to retire to their farms and live on their pensions. Instead, they chose to march once more. Under Augustus, the 10th Legion embarked on campaigns that would dwarf even their achievements under Caesar. They found themselves in the deserts of Egypt, on the frozen frontiers of Germania, and eventually in the ancient land of Judea. Each campaign added new chapters to their legend, new stories of impossible victories against overwhelming odds. The siege of Jerusalem in 70 years after Christ represents perhaps their finest hour, though it came at a terrible cost. For nearly 5 months, the 10th Legion methodically dismantled one of the ancient world's greatest fortresses. They built siege works that were marvels of engineering, constructed battering rams that could breach walls 20 feet thick, and showed the same disciplined patience that had made them legendary in Gaul. Here's something remarkable. Even after all those decades, even after serving under different commanders in different wars, the 10th maintained their unique traditions. Their centurions still wore those distinctive sideways crests. They still moved with that perfect coordination that had terrified enemies for generations. They still carried themselves with the quiet confidence of soldiers who had never truly been defeated. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of their later service was how they adapted to garrison life. After the great campaigns ended, the 10th found themselves stationed along the empire's distant borders, in Britain, in Syria, in the wild lands beyond the Danube. These weren't the glorious battles of their youth, but they approached this duty with the same professionalism that had made them famous. Veterans of the 10th became the backbone of Roman frontier society. They married local women, raised families, built communities that would last for centuries. Their children grew up hearing stories of Bibracte and Pharsalus, of the time their fathers had changed the world alongside the greatest general in history. And here's what truly sets the 10th Legion apart from every other military unit in ancient history. They proved that the bond between soldiers and their commander could transcend even death itself. Caesar was gone, but the spirit he had instilled in his favorite legion lived on through every campaign, every frontier posting, every moment when new recruits learned what it meant to serve in the ranks of the unconquered. Modern military units still study the 10th Legion, still marvel at how they combined innovation with tradition, tactical brilliance with unwavering loyalty. Their story raises a question that echoes through every age. What truly makes a force unstoppable? Is it the sharpness of their weapons, the strength of their walls, the size of their treasury? Or is it something deeper, the unbreakable trust between those who fight together, who face danger together, who refuse to abandon each other no matter what the odds? The eagle standards of the 10th Legion eventually disappeared into the mists of history, but their legacy lives on. Every time soldiers choose loyalty over safety, innovation over tradition, brotherhood over personal gain, the spirit of Caesar's favorite legion marches with them. They had started as ordinary men from ordinary backgrounds, recruited into what seemed like just another Roman legion. But through shared hardship, brilliant leadership, and an almost mystical bond of brotherhood, they became something timeless, a reminder that human beings, working together with absolute trust and shared purpose, can achieve things that seem impossible. The shadows of their eagles still fall across every battlefield where courage meets loyalty, where innovation meets tradition, where ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things together. What lessons can we draw from this ancient tradition? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more untold stories of the ancient world.